Mesabi. My name is Cesar Ortega, and I'm here today with Frank Pezzutto, Kelly Joe, and Mark. So we're going to be talking about geology today on the Iron Range, and we're going to be talking about Ellen Jasper, which is a special kind of rock that's found up here. So, Frank, you are a geologist. How long have you been in the field?
Well, I started when I was 19, so I've been in the field for 43 years.
43 years?
43 years.
And what got you into it?
Well, I grew up in Ontario, and every Saturday I used to watch Hockey Night in Canada. And they had this commercial on where it was Exxon or Esso, and in that commercial they had this geologist who was looking for uranium, and he was walking through the wilderness of northern Saskatchewan, and then he climbed up on an outcrop, and he's banging away on rocks and looking at the rocks in his hand lens, and then at the end they panned out and you could see this guy looking over this huge wilderness, pristine wilderness, and I said, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So the simple as watching a commercial during a hockey game. That's what, and interestingly enough, about 30 years after that, I did work for an outfit looking for uranium up in the Canadian Arctic. So
Really?
yeah, time is circular, I guess.
Is there uranium over here?
Is there uranium in northern Minnesota? Yes, but nothing of economic value.
Okay.
This is not really uranium country.
Yeah, I would hope not. I don't think you'd want it to be. Mark, you want to tell me about what you do?
Basically, we got involved a number of years ago in basically waste rock out of the mines. We were dealing with it and a project we had, and growing up in Biwabik, we just kind of looked at that as the dirty red or gray rock that was nothing but waste rock until we started cutting into it and looking into it and finding out just how beautiful this rock is. And been always interested in rocks since I was a little kid, not quite as adventurous as Frank was, but our playgrounds were the natural ore mines as they shut down in the mine dumps. And we found that once they were closed down, that was just a great source of more adventure. And always interested in rocks, and jasper and quartz were always a treasure. And I got more and more interested in about 15 years ago. And it's been interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so when you say, you're talking about Ellen Jasper when you're talking about like the red rock. And Kelly Jo, you're the expert on Ellen Jasper.
That's what they say, yeah.
Okay.
So I've always liked rocks ever since I was little. No commercial, but just rocks. And when I applied at Laurentian Monument Granite and Stone, which is one of Mark's companies, he says, "Oh, I own the Biwabik Mary Ellen mine. You can go out there and pick rocks whenever you want." And that's kind of where I guess the whole Mary Ellen thing just blossomed from me, because then I wanted to learn as much as I could about it and, of course, find it, which I've done a pretty good job at.
So do you have like another background with stones, or it was just Ellen Jasper you went all in with?
When I was younger, it was agates. So that was a big one around here, collecting agates. I mean, we could go back to when I was like 2-3 years old. My mom would send me out to the driveway and say, "Find me a rock that looks like a triangle or a square or a circle." And I mean, I've just been looking down ever since, I guess. Anything that looks cool goes in my pocket.
Yeah, I mean, I had like a little bit of a rock phase myself. I used to live in the state of Virginia. They had the Luray Caverns there, and they had the fool's gold.
Pyrite.
Yeah, I was like, ooh, it's pretty useless, but it was nice. But yeah, that was about like my stint with geology. So Frank, what does a geologist do besides like looking for uranium?
Well, geology is such a broad field. It's kind of like medicine. I mean, if you're in medicine, you can choose 50 different practices. So a geologist, you can be what I was. I was essentially an exploration geologist, where you go out in the field and it's basically being a glorified prospector. Or you can be a petroleum geologist. You can be a paleontologist that studies plant spores, that studies the way the climate has changed since the last ice age, for instance. You can be, what I'm kind of getting into now in my second career, is a hydrogeologist, where you're studying groundwater and trying to mitigate groundwater pollution. So the field is huge.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know you had to deal with the underground water too. So
Yeah, that's hydrogeology, which is a very important and very growing field right now.
So, is there anything interesting about the geology on the Iron Range?
How much time do we have?
We have quite a bit of time. Go off.
I find the geology here to be fascinating because so much of the way northern Minnesota was settled is because of the geology. Of course, you can't get away from the iron mining because most of the towns up here owe their livelihood to the existence of the Biwabik iron formation. But one thing people always forget about is glaciation. So 120,000 years ago, there was a mile-thick sheet of ice over us. And it basically dissipated and disappeared and melted away, and this area was clear of ice, say, 20,000 years ago. But what was left over? You have hills, you have valleys, you have lakes and streams. And so you have the Minnesota logging industry, which was really important, where the trees grew on those hills. And then you have the tourism industry, which here is very important because you have people that like to fish and water ski and boat in the rivers and streams. And then where you don't have high hills and you don't have a swamp or a lake, you have some pretty decent fertile ground, especially just south of here, so you have agriculture. So much of the Minnesota economy is based on geologic processes.
Okay. And when you mentioned the glacier, that's a really special glacier, isn't it? Like
That was a Laurentide glacial period. There's probably 11 different glacial periods that swept through Minnesota over the course of, I don't know, say 3 billion years.
Okay. And now talking about like the ancient history of Minnesota, Kelly Jo, do you want to tell me a little bit about Mary Ellen Jasper?
Sure. So at the risk of sounding like a broken record, because I say this a lot, but it's Mary Ellen Jasper. It's roughly 1.88 billion years old, which Frank can hopefully agree on there. But with the Mary Ellen Jasper, it is fossilized algae or stromatolites, and that was essentially the main form of life, give or take, 1.88 billion years ago. The algae would take in the oxygen that was here, and then essentially their waste product is what we breathe today, the air. So they created the oxygen. They brought the level, I believe it was 2%, up to the 22-ish that we're breathing today. So the stromatolite has a very important role in our history as a whole. And the stromatolite is what's in Mary Ellen Jasper and what makes it so unique.
And it was originally found here.
In Biwabik.
In Biwabik, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there are still living stromatolites in Australia, and I'm sure other parts of the world as well. But the Biwabik iron formation that Frank mentioned is going to be one of the main ones for our area where the stromatolites formed, and it had the right components to create the Mary Ellen Jasper. And then Mary Ellen Jasper was found in Biwabik in Mark's mine, the Mary Ellen mine.
Okay. Yeah, I got to take a look at some of it, and even like some of the things that you make with it. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, we got, interested in it. The Mary Ellen Jasper was actually, they identified what it was at the mine in Biwabik. And they knew they existed for probably 80, 90 years when they started mining this area and finding them, but they actually identified and said, hey, these are fossil. They knew they were fossils, but not of what. We have created everything from countertops to tabletops to fireplace surrounds to
cemetery monuments.
Yes, we've built some unique monuments and cemetery markers. It's a beautiful stone and it's usable. Although, and Frank can correct me on the pronunciation, I always say brecciated stone, and I don't think that's a proper pronunciation. Not only is it very hard, but it tends to not have a lot of integrity. So when you find a stone that you can actually slab, it's a treasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah,
and they're pretty heavy too.
Yes, they are. They're very, very heavy. But it's done everything from building material to decorative to jewelry. It has been, and the stone itself has been used for, well, we have evidence of 10,000 years.
Really?
That the stone is very valuable, was very valuable to the Native Americans and the ancient people as not only a tool and a weapon, it was also used for trading, and it is supposed to be bring good health and good luck. And the stories of that go back for years and years. I think Frank might be aware of the Silver Beach elk. I don't know if you've ever found that. And a number of years ago, we were contacted by a group out of Wisconsin that a couple of guys were diving many years ago in one of the lakes around the Eau Claire area, and they found the skeleton, the complete skeleton of an elk.
Really?
In the bottom of this lake. They also found a spear that had killed the elk, and as they got into it, it looked like the elk was actually butchered on the lake, and as the ice melted, it fell through. It was studied by, my God, probably every university in the Midwest, and it was determined that the elk had been killed about 500 years ago. The people who discovered it found the spear, and they kind of kept that. They thought that was their treasure, and after they found out how interesting this thing was, they turned it over. However, they kept the spearhead, and they had determined that the staff of the spear was 10,000 years old. So they gave up the spearhead, which was determined was about the same age. They brought it to every university in the Midwest that had a geological department, and it was all determined that the stone came from the area of the Mary Ellen mine. So the Native Americans were actually mining 10,000 years ago, and they're building a museum for this elk. It's supposedly quite the museum, and we're going to hopefully get down and see it. We provided a similar stone so that they could recreate the spearhead, and the people who found it, I guess, are keeping the original one, and the state Wisconsin DNR wanted to recreate that spearhead, and they got the stone from us, and
Cool.
And
Yeah.
the last I knew, are looking for a stone napper, which is a trade that's not been around for many years.
I know one, but you know what's really remarkable about that story, considering that you said that handle is 10,000 years old? Ice disappeared here 20,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's, geologic speaking, that's not a very long time.
Oh, and you know, the thing was about it when they came up with this, I mean, there was question after question after question. This was discovered years ago, and they have been going forever trying to determine. You know, I would figure that had to happen shortly after the ice had disappeared.
Yeah, it would
Would have, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd never even heard of that before, but
Yeah.
that's
But
cool.
it was traded extensively. I mean, they have records of it being traded throughout the Midwest. It was because of its hardness and the chert and the sharpness of it. I mean, you get some of it and you chip it, my gosh, you can almost shave with it. It's, you know, so it was
Sharp.
very valuable.
Yeah. And Frank, you wanna? Because I kind of wanted to talk about this a little bit too, as far as the iron mining on the range.
Okay.
Can you tell me a little bit about like maybe why there's like so much like of a big iron deposit up here?
Okay. Interestingly enough, this spring I'm doing at the SME symposium in Duluth. I'm going to discuss basically the two major types of iron formation. They're the Algoma type and the Superior type. Algoma type iron formation basically form deep in the earth across. Well, I got to back up here. To study and really understand iron formation, you have to have a good understanding of, if anything, plate tectonics. So Algoma type iron formations form when you have two plates, oceanic plates, and they come apart, and from there you have hot springs coming out. So you have silica-rich hot water full of iron. It's emanating from the earth crust. It hits cold sea water and it precipitates out, and it forms the Algoma type iron formation. The most important ones up are like the Sudan iron formation that you find up by Ely and Tower. The iron formation that we may be sitting on right in this building is the superior type, which is basically a chemical iron formation in which you have a lot of iron floating around in this ancient ocean. It was called the Anamiki Ocean, which was basically just a giant ancient Lake Superior. This was the north shore of Lake Superior, say 1.8 billion years ago. Hard to believe that, because Duluth is 60 miles that way, right? So you had this iron, some of it from the super plume, picture these volcanic vents, and you had some iron floating around from basically the hills to the north that started to undergo chemical erosion.
And that's all coming from like the tectonic plates like shifting and
Yes. I mean, this place, more than 1.8 billion years ago, no pun intended, was really rocking and rolling, okay? So you had the stromatolites taking CO2, sunlight, giving off oxygen, right? Photosynthesis. So you have oxygen getting dispersed into this ocean full of iron. The iron and the oxygen joined together, depending on the valence, and they formed Fe2O3, which is hematite, or Fe3O4, which is magnetite. Magnetite's a magnetic ore, and hematite is basically the red ore, the silvery ore. So you have two types of iron formation in here. Within 50 miles, you have the two major types of economic iron deposits that are formed anywhere in the world.
And besides like the color and the magnetism, is there like which one is like stronger, or like is there a difference between them?
Well, magnetite is magnetic, hematite is not. Magnetite, if it's pure, has 72% iron. Hematite is 70% iron. So magnetite got a little bit more iron, you get a little bit more bang for your buck. But it was the hematite, it was the soft red ore that people were able to dig over 100 years ago with shovels, wheelbarrows, and that iron, the hematitic soft iron, is one of the reasons why the United States 100 years ago was able to become such a rapid economic giant.
Yeah, just the iron boom.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, once you're able to build railroads, the future is yours.
Yeah, and that's a big reason why we did so well. Like around that time period, we're just like pumping out steel.
Well, the iron from the Iron Range certainly helped win 2 world wars, that's for sure.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Mary Ellen Jasper too. So, Kelly Jo, what can you tell me about like Mary Ellen Jasper on the range?
So I can tell you a little bit about Mary Ellen Jasper in Mark's Mine in Biwabik. That's going to be kind of the extent of my area of expertise, because that's the only place that I've really been around looking. With the Mary Ellen mine, it started as an iron mine in 1924. So we're coming up on 100 years that it originally opened and started. And it was named after the owner's daughter, was it? Mary Ellen. So it was Butler Brothers, I believe, that opened it. He named it after his only daughter, Mary Ellen. And then, of course, the stromatolite fossils when they were digging out the overburden, because the stromatolites were on top of the iron ore that they were mining back then. And Frank can correct me if I'm wrong there, that all the stromatolites were up on top. Because the iron would be underneath it, because they took in they said CO2 and brought the iron underneath.
I see what you're getting at. There's several stromatolite horizons throughout the Biwabik iron formation, but in a lot of cases, I'm not an expert at the geology of the Mary Ellen mine, but generally speaking, a lot of the stromatolite was right at the bottom of the iron formation. That's the one that helped precipitate out the iron deposition that formed on top of it.
Okay.
So later in time, or the iron on top of it was younger. But there is iron in the stromatolites.
Oh, yeah.
That's why the stromatolites are that beautiful red and orange color, because they have a little bit of hematite in the chert or the quartz to give it just that gorgeous color.
So, because the Mary Ellen Jasper that I've seen, like with the red in it, that's hematite. You said
That is jasper, and the hematite gives jasper its red color.
Okay. So, is there I mean, because I'm not a geologist, so like, please correct me if I'm if I'm taking this incorrectly. Is there a different type of Maryland jasper that's with the other type of iron, or is it just the hematite?
Everything we've found is all hematite. We've not found any magnetic, which if it was magnetite in there, there would be. We know there's taconite, which is magnetite below us, but the level that our mine is at is we have not found really any. On top of the hill, as you know, just go north from us, they're mining just a matter of maybe 1,000 yards away from us where they're finding it. So basically the formation drops there. And where they were mining the hematite apparently had settled on top of the magnetite.
Oh.
So, but as far as the Mary Ellen, we've never found anything with that contained any magnetite. It's all hematite.
There are several types of stromatolites. They have different forms. What makes the Mary Ellen mine so famous is because, in my opinion, it's the prettiest stromatolite I've seen anywhere. Anywhere. It's just gorgeous.
And you're absolutely right about that, Frank, because one of the things that I enjoy about dealing with the Mary Ellen and its infamy is that we get visited by geologists from all over the world. Last summer we had a gentleman there from British Columbia. We get toured, I don't know, every so many years from the Curtin University in Perth, Australia. And I mean, we've had just tons and tons of knowledgeable people come in there, you know, with backgrounds like Frank, that are just, it's a day with great education. Especially the Australians. The Australians claim that their stromatolites are about 400 billion years old, but they will come right out and tell you they have nothing that is as distinct and, as Frank said, as beautiful as ours. I mean, when you look at them, I mean, you're waiting for them to move or something. They're just gorgeous, and there's been so many stories. You know, I've learned from all these geologists that, you know, there's so many theories of what had happened, and every one of them is extremely interesting. The geologists from the Curtin University believe that this whole area was formed by the effects of the Sudbury impact, which I've talked to many geologists here, and they've brought it up, but they doubt it. So there's these different theories that make things extremely interesting.
So you're talking about like, the impact of like the asteroid.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Long
that
time
was
ago.
1.8 billion years ago.
Yep,
600 miles to the east of here.
yep.
Really?
Yeah, that stuff went, it's called ejecta. Think about it, that's 600 miles it went flying.
That was
Quite
the-
the distance.
That was the biggest object that ever hit Earth.
Was it?
The Sudbury.
know of.
Yeah, yeah. So it shook things up, but you know, when you hear all these theories, it really makes you start wondering what really created this. When you look at the stone, as Frank mentioned before, when you look at the stone and you look how it was formed, you wonder what was going on in the world. It had to be, as Frank said, really rocking and rolling, because it's just amazing.
Yeah, no, and it's a really pretty stone. Like I've
Yeah.
seen like some of the stuff that you've done with it, like some of I think it was like a granite or a countertop that you did.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then some of the jewelry, and it's really, really pretty. On that quick break, whenever you started the camera up, can you tell me a little bit more about what you were talking about with what you can find at Mintac?
Okay, as I mentioned previously, you can find stromatolites in various forms. At the bottom of a lot of the iron formation here, the Biwabik iron formation, the stromatolites looks like it's map forms. It's like very thin layers of yellows and white quartz and that beautiful dark red or sometimes even an orange jaspery stuff. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, the stuff is very friable. It breaks into a lot of pieces. I have a couple of nice chunks at home. Then you go up section from through the cherts, and then you get into the slate. And I've only found this in a few places. You get these, and I don't know how they form, but in the middle of the slate you get these round spheres. They look like bowling balls. I call them cabbage heads, but they're gorgeous red and orange spheres. And then you go up section again where the ore is still younger into the upper chert, and that is just full of stromatolites. beautiful hemispheroids where it looks like little thimbles, sewing thimbles on top of each other. And of course, since this happened in the shallow water, you get a lot of fragments, so you get all kinds of beautiful fragmental stromatolites. But I did mention to you that I have green stromatolite, which I've only seen in one place. And next time I swing by, I'll let you see it. But it's not beautiful by any means, not as pretty as the Mary Ellen just stuff, but it certainly is different. And I have seen some black stromatolites where it's just black, but you can see a little bit of this white quartz silica, and you can see the little hemispheroids. Very unusual stuff.
Now, we have found out at the Mary Ellen, we have found brown, which is a reddish brown, not hematite or not iron ore red, but it's a reddish brown, and we have found yellow.
Yeah. And that's probably a siderite iron,
Okay.
Iron carbonate,
Okay.
which explains the yellow and brown.
And did they not? The colors were determined by the minerals that were surrounding them when they were formed. Was that not?
It could be. It's just like agates. Agates have different colors because you might have you might have a little bit of manganese or magnesium or copper, and that gives you different banding. So stromatolites are like that. You have different trace metals or elements, and you give it a different color.
Okay.
And both of them are just beautiful. Although I gotta admit, I do like agates, but I think I might like stromatolites more.
I do.
Okay.
And one of the things that we found when we started slabbing taconite and polishing it and fabricating with it, and the county building in St. Louis County building in Virginia has some examples of it. As we were going through this and got it polished out, we noticed little spectacles of gold all over it, just tiny. The biggest one would maybe be half the size of, or a quarter the size of your little fingernail. So we determined, I figured right away it was pyrite, and we made a couple of real simple tests, just enough to say we need to get an acid test. And I had decided at the time that we weren't going to test it, because if somebody wants to put that in their kitchen and tell their neighbors they have gold in their countertop, I'm not going to be the guy to tell them it's not.
It's like, yeah, it's gold.
Yeah.
There was a countertop that we did at Laurentian Monument, and we did a rock edge, so we broke the edging so it looked like it was just a rough rock. And right on the edge, there was a chunk of pyrite, perfectly cubed, sticking out of the side. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I'm rock nerd, so I'm taking a ton of pictures of it, and it's the coolest thing. And I'm telling the guys when they install, you have to tell the people and show this to them so they know it's here. This is so cool. So yeah, we've definitely seen quite a few instances where it's like that, but you can see that nice square. So I would hate to burst Mark's bubble, but
Probably pyrite.
Definitely
it
fool's
definitely
gold
was pyrite,
or
absolutely.
pyrite there. But
Which I learned today. I didn't know it was called pyrite. I thought it was just fool's gold.
Fool's gold. That was another treasure to collect as kids.
Oh yeah, I had a ton of it.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh yeah, it's like useless. I was like, oh. So now I just have a bunch of pyrite somewhere, like in a box.
And some of it, I mean, we've seen some pretty good. Usually, you don't see large formations. I mean, we're seeing some that are, not the size of your fist, but close, which is surprising. I never knew that stuff was. Yeah,
I think they're gorgeous.
Yeah. Oh, they're very
grassy
pretty.
looking cubes,
Yeah.
and they're striated quite often.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them in a rock shop for $300 a pop. So
Yeah.
So
if I see one, I'll pick one up.
So talking about like pyrite and like all these other different kinds of rocks, what are some of your like favorite finds like on the range or like rocks that people could find?
That's a pretty good question. Obviously, we've discussed a lot about stromatolite, but you mentioned agates because during the last glaciation, you had ice scouring out Lake Superior and then brought a lot of the North Shore volcanic rocks here. So you find some nice pockets of just absolutely beautiful agates. Not too far from where we're sitting right here is the Virginia Horn gold deposit.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's some very nice right along the bike trail. Just don't go over there with a sledgehammer and pound it all off and bring it home in a bucket, because it's a place where people like to it's a place where geologists go to study gold locally, okay? But there's some very nice gold in that quartz vein there, and a very nice, distinct green chromium mica called fuscite, which is a gold indicator mineral. And then just to the east of here, you probably have one of the world's largest untapped copper, nickel, cobalt deposits with some very nice platinum values. And if this country is serious about developing electric vehicles, then obviously that deposit should be tapped because it is, as I mentioned, one of the world's largest copper nickel deposits and cobalt, platinum, palladium, iridium, and all the rest. Of course, we mentioned iron, but to the north here, as you start heading towards Rainy Lake, you have a lot of granites. And it's conceivable, since you have granites and coarse-grained granites, you probably will have lithium deposits, which are, lithium is another one of those metals that people are discussing and looking for when they're talking about electric vehicles. So say within 50 miles here, you have just a tremendous amount of geology and different rocks. Of course, you have your dimensional stone. It's a good place to be a geologist or just a rock hound in general.
Just kind of a geologist playground.
Yes, it is. That's why I stayed here. Plus, I like to go fishing.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
I have to do a little bit of ice fishing myself probably sometime soon once the ice is.
The ice is thick enough.
I heard
I'm from
somebody.
Florida. I'm scared still.
I heard somebody had a four-wheeler and a permanent ice house out on the ice. And I'm thinking, not yet, not for me.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Like even like into January, I don't know how people up here are just like, yeah, cool.
Yeah, especially
Right on
with
the
this, especially with this weather. I mean, we're supposed to be in the 40s, Thursday or something?
Yeah, it's all over the place. But back on track.
Yeah.
All right. So, where else has Mary Ellen Jasper been discovered? You're the expert.
So which Frank can certainly correct me if I'm wrong here, but to my knowledge with the research that I've done, Mary Ellen Jasper comes out of the Mary Ellen mine. So now the Biwabik iron formation does stretch quite a ways, and then glaciers can move the material. But for me personally, how I collect stone, I would say if it doesn't come out of essentially Biwabik area, the Mary Ellen mine, it's not Mary Ellen Jasper. And there's a lot of people, especially because I do all of the Facebook and stuff for the Biwabik Mary Ellen Stone Co., where I have a lot of people that butt heads, will say nicely, and say, well, no, I found Mary Ellen Jasper in Michigan. I found Mary Ellen Jasper in Iowa. But for me, it's one of those things, this is where it was created, which it certainly can be created as long as the seasonings are right in other places around the world. So with that one, as far as where it can be found, I would kind of, again, throw that one to Frank just
The
because
Mary Ellen
special.
Jasper is restricted to the Mary Ellen mine, and if you haven't copywritten it, I would.
So it's
There are different types of stromatolites, but there's only the Mary Ellen Jasper from the Mary Ellen mine.
So it's very much like Champagne. Like if it's not
Yes.
from Champagne, France, then it's
Yeah,
not Champagne.
Champagne has to come from that region in France, not from California.
I mean, I disagree with the Champagne one, but I definitely get it.
So there's certainly a lot of people that I've heard of, like Michigan, kind of around our area, where they say, oh yeah, I found Mary Ellen Jasper, and it's like, stromatolite Jasper is my big thing. I tell everyone, unless it came out of Biwabik, I mean, surrounding areas gets a little tricky, because I mean, you can find it in Hibbing, well, kind of, but I mean, anywhere on that Biwabik formation, it's could have the same ingredients that we have. But I tell a lot of people, stromatolite Jasper, if it does not come out of Biwabik in our mine, and then all the stuff that we sell out of our mine comes with a letter of authenticity that has both Mark's signature and my signature that says, yep, this is from our mine, the mine.
And for viewers too, if you haven't, I know I've probably put it in the comments, but there is a link below that'll show you what Mary Ellen Jasper looks like, so you can take a peek at that too, since we're just talking about it and we don't have anything to kind of show you.
Another thing that we have run across, and even some discussion amongst people of your profession, was the size that stromatolites would grow to.
So how big would they get?
Well, as far as I can say, and Frank can obviously correct me, it's the most I've studied is like stated like 30 centimeters in diameter,
Oh, yeah.
which is a pretty good piece of bacteria.
Yeah, the ones in Shark Bay, Australia, the ones presently, they're probably not all that much smaller than if you were to put a circle in this
Yeah,
table here.
yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they're as
like
big
wide?
as those. If you go to the little
Like a
harbor,
big
I don't know what the
circle.
things are called, where you have the ship throw the ropes on. What is that called? I don't know.
I should know that.
The anchors or
Yeah,
the cleats.
from Florida.
On
Cleats?
here,
Should
they
know.
throw the ropes
I
on.
went on a dock for
They're usually
like
painted
one
yellow.
day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're about.
Well,
So, and it's algae? Like that's what stromatolites are?
It's an algae mat. It's a colony. It's kind of like a coral. You know, coral, they're individual little critters, but they form this huge, not a duplex, a multiplex, just a massive colony. That's what it is.
Okay.
They're colonies.
The-
They're algal colonies.
these stromatolite mounds, like east of White Lakes and that, are huge. And I mean, they're so evident that you just see them coming up out of these formations of stone. And apparently when it was formed, they were resilient enough to withstand, you know, the turmoil going on in the world just a hair. So they were left as a mound amongst all this, you know, a rock formation. It's really, really unique. We've never cut into them, and I don't know that I'd ever want to, but I mean, they're really, really
The- the-
unusual.
The algae would literally grab grains of sand and kind of like get them to adhere to themselves to protect them from the waves and also from UV radiation.
Really?
Yeah, so they were like self-armoring. They're like little plates.
It's so weird that like, algae plants and stuff like that do that almost reflexively. Like that's always bizarre to me. They have, like, survival
they were
instincts.
pretty smart critters considering they're 1.8 or 1.8 billion years old.
Yeah. Are there any like descendants of it? I know that you said that there are stromatolites still alive.
Yes.
Are there like did it branch off into other things, or it's still like the same species?
Oh, boy, I'd have to think of
That's a
what
big
I
question.
learned
If
in biology class 40 years
Yeah,
ago.
if you give it great thought, we kind of branched off as stromatolites.
That's true. Yeah, it's a
The
super
other
important
things
thing.
that stromatolites were accredited with is that they changed the speed of the Earth. Have you read that?
No.
Because of the process of photosynthesis bringing oxygen creating everything from plant life to all the way to human life, animal life, the speed of the Earth was changed by the weight of the mass that it was obtaining because of the oxygenation. And back 2 billion years ago, the Earth, a given day on Earth was 18 hours long. And then because of this, basically it's just slowing down the revolving of the Earth. And it has slowed it to the point where our days are 24 hours long. And stromatolites were given the pat on the back for that as well. So they were pretty important.
You know, it's interesting you mention that because I'm not going to name names, but I had a gentleman come visit from NASA, and he was studying stromatolites because he was studying lunar tides 1.8 billion years ago.
Really?
Yes,
So
and that really made me scratch my head. But now this starting
Yeah.
to make sense why they were interested.
Why they were looking
because
at it.
probably the days were longer or shorter, the
They-
years
they-
were
yeah.
longer or shorter, and maybe there were more days in a year. I don't know.
Yeah, they claimed that a given day at that period was only 18 hours it took for the complete rotation.
Can you imagine though if you worked a 12-hour shift?
Yeah, there'd be very little time for fishing and hunting. Hey,
it's my world.
Yeah.
But, I'm gonna have to look
So-
that up. I'm gonna.
Yes.
If I find the link, it's gonna be in the comments below because that's really interesting. I never heard of that one before.
yeah, I was just, in fact, I find reading about stromatolites pretty interesting anymore. And I mean, I've read all kinds of unique things about them, and some of them, of course, are theory, but a lot of them they have scientific background to prove, and they were pretty important in the world up until that time. Earth was just like the rest of the planets in our universe. In
Just
fact,
flat
that's
line
what they're
almost.
studying. That's what they're looking for at Mars, is something similar to stromatolites. That's the life form they're looking for, is just some sort of a
Something that
bacterial-
produces like
yeah,
something.
That's what their studies are about.
And then I just want a quick insert here that the state of Minnesota apparently does not have a state fossil. So I was doing some research on this earlier this year. There were, I guess, a vote at the Minnesota State Fair, not this past year, but I believe the year previous. And Mary Ellen Jasper was not one of the top runners. It was a vote by the people. And I want to say that there's a beaver bone that was kind of the top. They haven't decided yet, so it's still open. Mary Ellen has a chance. But I just want to throw this out here that with
Yeah.
the big impact that Mary Ellen Jasper has on the world, not just Minnesota, I think it can beat out a beaver bone for the state fossil.
Thank you for
Interesting.
bringing that up.
Is,
Yeah.
is there still like a vote going on for it?
I believe so, because it went to, is it the Senate or whoever decides makes the final decision? They did where the public could vote at, I think it was the state fair, on what they thought it should be, but it never actually went through because it was between a beaver bone. I want to say there was like a shark. I talked with a paleontologist at Minnesota Discovery
Oh,
Center.
it might be shark teeth from the West Range.
But there was some shark that was specific to the Minnesota area, and then stromatolites or Mary Ellen was another one that was kind of in there. But I mean,
So it's in the running, but
kind
it's like,
of. But the bone was what everyone, the beaver bone, which it sounds like it was just a bone, not a full beaver. Which I mean,
not even a full beaver.
a
like-
beaver could have came from Wisconsin, from Canada, from anywhere, and just happened to end its life in Minnesota. So I just wanted to throw that out there. State fossil, Mary Ellen Jasper, stromatolite.
Is there an online voting platform for it? Do you know of?
There was one. I don't know if it's still going on.
If there is a voting thing and I pull it up, it'll be in the link below. Please vote for Mary Ellen Jasper for the Minnesota State Fossil.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're here, might as well.
And the thing is, you know, the beaver bone that we've run into back when I was a heck of a lot younger. I worked for Erie Mining Company up at Dunker River. And we found, as they were stripping up, we found some amazing things, you know, from prehistoric beavers that were estimated to weighing in at about 800 pounds. And I mean, there was some really unique stuff. We found evidence of it. We had, one of our members of our hunting crew was worked for the state forestry. And we found all kinds of remains of old logging camps in the area we hunt. And we found this unique structure. And we thought it was a railroad grade because it resembled a railroad grade. And he looked at it and couldn't understand why the levels were different. And at the University of Minnesota came up there, this is many years ago, and dug it up and found it to be basically a prehistoric beaver dam. And it was huge. And I mean, when they dug it up, they found, you know, remains in there that were gigantic, but the beavers are only like 10,000 years old at that when they're bringing these fossils in, and we've got them beat by a few billion.
But I think the rocks have a beat. So
Yeah.
but-
Yeah, with
Yeah.
stromatolites, Mary Ellen. I mean, we're older than dinosaurs, so I feel like that should also play a big role in it too. I mean, it's not something that was, we'll say, more recent of a fossil. I mean, this has been around for a very, very long time.
Well, the big thing about it is you know, the fossils of dinosaurs are a more exciting find.
Yeah.
You
Same
know,
thing
when they
with
can look
the
at
beaver.
skeletons and bones and everything else. You
Well,
know?
I mean, when you look at the impact of like dinosaurs versus stromatolites, well, okay, I guess you got like fossil fuel.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're talking about something that was the original oxygen producer.
Yeah.
That's insane to like
Well-
just find it like sitting in your backyard, and you can just dig it
Well-
up, and it looks amazing.
The dinosaurs wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the stromatolites.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So which came first, the stromatolites? Like
Yeah.
it's the definitely like the originator of a lot of things that have happened on our planet.
Yeah, the world would be a lot different if stromatolites weren't a thing. There'd be so much. I mean, who knows if we'd even be here if we'd
I should
adapt
know
to
this.
something else.
Does Minnesota have a state stone?
Agate.
The agate.
Agate?
I thought,
And
no,
I-
I
I
thought
don't-
that was a state
Agates.
gem.
Oh, I didn't know if there was a difference there. I think it is the state gemstone. Now that you say that, I think agate's the
Because
state gemstone.
Mary Ellen Jasper is considered a semi-precious gemstone.
Interesting.
The big thing that really interested me, and it is the more you read about it, is the healing qualities that they're. To this day, people strongly believe that they hold this tremendous healing power, and that was another thing, like I mentioned before, that it was traded for, and not as anything to make a joke of or be comical. We had a customer who was terminal, and he wanted one. He said anything that might help, you know. And I guess if you believe in it, you believe in it. But it also had, they claimed it had powers for everything from mental health to physical health, to give you strength and all this. So
It's supposed to
that-
help with organizational skills
Yeah.
also.
Yes, that's right. We read that the other day.
Yep. So
If we
Mark's
look-
office should be just super organized.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention my desk.
Yeah. I've been to your
Yeah,
office.
yeah. Yeah, it's not quite as organized as it should be, but
And you're surrounded with it out there.
yeah. But
Just
I
need
find
more,
it
you just
really
need a-
interesting when you get visited by, all these geologists, and there's groups from Duluth, and, we're working with a lot of architects now, landscape architects, that are finding, for when it came to natural stone before, it was always field stone, and now they're finding that, they can get stone with, that's full of stromatolites and extremely unique stone. And we have a couple of firms that are using a lot of it for just decorative stone. And it is by far a lot more interesting to look at than a piece of, field stone.
Yeah. No, it definitely caught my attention when I
Yeah,
first heard about
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be wrapping up here in just a little bit. So just want to go over like a couple more things. What else can you tell me that's your favorite part of the geology of the range?
Well, I gotta admit, I've always enjoyed going to work and working in my field, because when you're involved in mining, like I have been, and I'm very passionate about mining, because let's face it, we're creating wealth out of a hole in the ground, and there aren't that many jobs out there in which you're a primary wealth producer. And I've always taken a great pride when I used to work in the iron ore mines to make a discovery and able to, for instance, scrape out another 600,000 tons of ore in an area in which people thought, okay, this area was mined out, and it's not. And we're able to keep the mine running, and maybe clean out the bottom of an area in which we can later use it to stockpile waste, so we save fuel. We don't have to truck stuff way up the hill or halfway to Canada. We're able to backfill an area that's mined out, and then we minimize the environmental impact that we have. So I've always just taken a pride in just the little incremental things, and then when you add them all up, it helps provide people with jobs, and it helps keep Minnesota mining very competitive to the other iron ore mines in the world. That's one of the things that really kept me getting out of bed in the morning and going to work.
All right, cool. And
Interesting.
what's y'all's favorite part of the geology? And it's gonna be Mary Ellen Jasper, obviously, but just tell me a little bit about it.
And we get into where, we're dealing with a lot of native stone to the, Minnesota mining, Biwabik Iron Formation. And, some of the most interesting days and enjoyable days I've had is when we go up and we prospect this stone and find, of course, different types of stone, different formations of stone. And one of the most enjoyable days I ever spent was with a geologist with the DNR, and we sat on some very uncomfortable rocks for about 7 hours.
Sounds like a
while
great day.
he explained, basically explained the world. And it is a very interesting field. When you look at a stone, and there's a question I'll ask Frank later, but it just popped in my head. But when you look at this stone and you realize that these plates that you're looking at, and I think the non-professional name for it is called slick and slide,
Okay,
where,
yeah.
where the plates have slid against each other for tens of thousands of years, and you can see this evidence in this stone. And it's very intriguing. I just find a great deal of joy out of working with it.
Just the history of the world,
Yeah.
almost like the rings of a tree, like written in stone.
Yes.
So I would have to say that my favorite part about the geology of the Iron Range is there's so many cool rocks. It's not just the Mary Ellen, it's not just the agates. It's literally, you can walk out your back door, walk down a hiking trail, and you can see this rock, but something that was created so long ago, and you might be the first person to ever pick it up and look at it and be able to take in what went into making that, what was going on, how Frank had said everything was rocking and rolling. But anywhere that you go here, you can find something that's just truly amazing, and you just, I don't know, just makes you sit and think like, okay, how did this happen? Like, what formed this? What was going on? It's just, I don't know. I just love rocks. I love talking about rocks. I love telling people about rocks, which I'm sure both Mark and Frank can agree with me, but it's just, here is special. The Iron Range is special. Everything that's, you just can't go anywhere without seeing something where it's like, oh my gosh, especially when you're like us looking for rocks. It's just endless opportunities.
You got to go digging for it.
Yeah. And like Kelly Jo just brought up, the interest is unbelievable. We get people, and she can attest to this, we get people consistently calling up to try to tour the mine.
All the time.
And we have actually considered allowing, public in there. However, insurance does not really want to, and I understand it.
Yeah.
You're just, I know there's places where they dig the rock up and they put it somewhere off to the side and you can pick through the rock piles. To me, that's not part of the enjoyment of it, but it is a tremendous risk to bring people in. And when we allow geologists and everything else there, all our insurance information is updated and on file. So I enjoy bringing the people in. We have donated, I'm not even going to guess at how many stones or even tons of stones we donate to educational facilities. We've got stones stretched from Arizona, Australia, and we are just presently getting a piece together, and it's going to the National Museum in Zagreb, Croatia.
Oh.
And I told them that we would donate the stone, but they can pay for the shipping. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty heavy.
How big
too.
are you talking though?
it's about 100 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They can pay for the shipping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
How much would
exactly.
that be in delivery fees?
Well, right now they told me they had a budget of $1,000, and we're having a tough time.
Yeah, I think it'd be
Yeah.
more than that.
Yeah.
But
Well, you're not going to put it on UPS or FedEx overnight, that's for sure.
that'd be a very unhappy UPS driver.
Yeah.
Like, I would not. I would
But
quit.
yeah, we're getting it ready to go, and we've worked with many colleges, and like I say, the Curtin University in Australia is. Those gentlemen are, because they come with a different approach, with their idea about the Sudbury impact, and some of the things that they brought to point it out, made sense. So.
But we got to wrap up. Thank you all for coming out here. And
Thank
that'll
you.
be the end of season 2. So, yeah, thanks for talking to me about geology today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having
Yep.
us.
Thank you much.
That was a lot of fun.
Thanks. And then I'll see you guys on season 2 of Meeting Mesabi.